friends, welcome to Law Chat with Girija. I'm Girija Bhargav Patel, your host for Law Chat, and I am so excited for you to join us today. I have some amazing guests on Law Chat, and they're here to share their experiences and entrepreneurial journey with us, and through their storytelling, mentorship with us, because that is the whole point. We are all entrepreneurs and we're all on a journey, and learning from one another is the best way for us to move forward in our journey as well. And I have amazing guests who are so willing and ready to share their stories with us, their challenges and their victories and their achievements, and also their mindset. I just can't wait to share that with you, and I also just can't wait to have that conversation with them. It's such a privilege to have each and every one of them here with us today, and also it's such a privilege to have you listening in and tuning in. So let's dive in to Law Chat with Girija.
Hi friends, welcome to Law Chat with Girija. Today I have a very special guest on today's show, and she has the most unique perspective on entrepreneurship, and also will kind of peel the layers of entrepreneurship that exist in this world as well. Megan Gillikin is not only a CEO, but she is also a successful event planner. She's a podcaster, she is a consultant, and she's also a speaker for many different events that have happened and conferences that happen around the nation. And so it's so special to have her on today's show. She is the owner of A Southern Soiree, event and wedding planning company, and also the Planner's Vault. And I just can't wait to hear her perspective and her story. So let's dive in. Welcome, Megan, to the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Yes, me too. So I gave a very brief description of all of the things that you do, because you do a lot. And so is there anything else you want to highlight, or should we just go straight to your story?
Yeah, so I have just a quick rundown. I've been in the event industry for about 15 years, and I'm also a mom to 3 girls, 8 and under, which has been an interesting journey during coronavirus with schools being closed. But yes, wear lots and lots of hats, and I'm trying to hang up some of those hats, to be honest.
Oh, wow. That's interesting that you say that. We can definitely touch on that too. When to know to leave and exit.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
And just knowing like where your passions are and one thought I've had a lot of in 2020 is we've all had this moment to pause, right? To figure out, it's been a forced pause, but we've had this pause to figure out what's working, what's not working. And a question I've been asking myself is like, okay, what am I taking with me to 2021? And what am I going to leave in 2020? So yeah.
I love that. I love that perspective, because right now is the time when people are figuring out 2021 if they've not been scared by 2020 and planning. But yeah, like I also have my goals set up, finishing 2020 and how I'm going to start 2021. So that's a great perspective to have, and a little tab to have open as what's going with me and what's not going with me. But before we get into that, tell me, how did you get into A Southern Soiree? Where did it all start?
Great story. Slightly traumatic, but great story. Okay, so I graduated from grad school, started working for Marriott up in the DC area, spent about 5 years in the hotel side of things, ended up making my way back to North Carolina, where I'm from, got engaged. I met my husband on Match.com, which was like the only dating app back in 2009. There's so many right now, I can't even keep track of them.
It's a lot.
It is a lot, but we met and we got engaged, got married in 2010. And at this point, I had about 5 years under my belt in the hotel side of things. I was working as a catering and event sales manager for a local property. And I felt like I was doing the same event over and over again. It was the same ballroom. It was the same menus. It was just a different couple and sometimes a different layout, but most of the time not. So I reached out to a local event planner that I had heard of her business. I had kind of worked with her for one wedding in a limited capacity at my particular hotel property. But I reached out to her and I said, I would love to know if you have any positions open. I'm looking to take the next step in my career. And being an event planner is definitely on that list for me. And I remember it took her about 3 weeks to get back to me, which should have potentially been a red flag, but it wasn't. And I ended up setting up a time to meet with her for coffee. I thought I was going into a job interview. So I had client reference letters, I had my resume, I was dressed in like corporate professional attire, and we met at the Starbucks near the hotel that I was working at the time. And of course I got there early because I'm an overachiever, and I sit there and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting, and it's like 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late, and finally she blows into the Starbucks, sits down, sunglasses on her head, wind-swept hair. She looked lovely, by the way. Sat down next to me and said, I'm burned out. I have had my business for 4 years. I'm looking for someone to buy it.
Wow.
I am planning to move in a few months, and I have a few weddings. I think it was 4 weddings on the books for next year that would be yours if you're interested in purchasing my business. So I went home to my husband. We'd been married about 3 weeks at this point. So it was very, very new. And I remember saying to him, it was such a bummer. I was very disappointed. I thought that it was going to be a job opportunity, but she's looking to sell her business. And that is something that in my mid-20s, we don't have the money to do that. And I'm not ready to be a business owner. That's maybe 5 years down the line. And I'll never forget Jason, my husband, him saying like, no, his eyes, they lit up. And he was like, no, we have to do this. This is what you're meant to do. We will take out a small business loan. You've got to leave your job. Like, you can do this. He's always been that cheerleader for me, where I tend to make myself small and live in a state of fear and don't want to do something if I know I can't be excellent at it. He is the one that's like, no, take a risk. Let's do it. So it's a really good balance in our marriage. And that's what we did. So that was 10 years ago. I gave notice at my great job that I really enjoyed. We took out a small business loan. We purchased a business. And I really needed to know you 10 years ago, to be honest, when that happened. That whole story is kind of funny. We can dive into that shortly. But the Cliff's Notes version of what happened over the last 10 years is that I bought a really crappy business. It had a bad reputation. Any venue in my market that as a wedding planner I would want to work at turned me away based on previous experience with the business owner. There's one that stands out in my mind. I'll never forget. You had to take an elevator to get up to the event space. And before the elevator doors even closed, of me riding up with the venue coordinator, she was like, you're a Southern Soiree. Like, we're never going to refer you. You're not going to work here. Yes.
Has that changed since then?
Thankfully, yes. Gosh, if it hadn't 10 years, this would be a big problem.
No, what I mean is like their perspectives, like how.
Yes, absolutely. So that was the interesting journey of purchasing a business in your mid-20s, not knowing the questions to ask, honestly, not really knowing the full legal side of things. And it was a journey. It was definitely a journey of rebuilding the reputation from a branding standpoint, from a vendor relations standpoint, from a client relations standpoint. There were a couple of bad reviews that were coming in from her clients after I had purchased the business. And I was like, oh no, there's no fresh start here. I'm living in what the previous owner did in a stage of burnout, which is what happened. Is it was once a good business. She reached a stage of burnout and she sold it a little, well, for her, I'm sure the timing was delightful, but it was a little late. So what I bought was, I've given this analogy before, but it's like that apple that you see in the fruit basket and you think like it's beautiful and it's shiny and it looks like it's going to be delicious. And then you pick it up and you take a bite out of it and it's like rotten on the inside.
Gushy.
Yeah.
I have so many questions about that one purchase only.
Yes. And I'm going to be completely open, honest, and vulnerable in this recording. That's honestly what I told myself before I sat down with you today. I was like, okay, this is because the business owner in me and I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. So I'm an achiever.
Mhm.
And that part of me wants to say, like, everything was great. And I asked all the right questions and I did all the right things, but that would be 100% lying. So I'm not going to do that. You're going to ask me questions like, did you have this? And I'm going to be like, I absolutely did not. And
I know. Well, just like the mere questions that come into my mind just for that one particular purchase also, and due diligence. And, there's just so much that goes into it. But before we get into that, I want to know, when you were at Marriott, you obviously gained a lot of experience there. I mean, at the end of the day, you learned how to navigate with clients, period. But then what was that tipping point where you were like, okay, I got this. I'm going to muster the courage and try to find another job.
I know.
So what was that in your mindset that helped you make that pivot at the time?
I love that question. I've never been asked that before. So I started as an assistant front desk manager up in the DC market. I was 23 and I was put in a role where I was managing people that had been working at the property longer than I had been living. And I was completely unqualified to have that position. So that was like the beginning of understanding the corporate world and the hotel side of things. And I learned a lot of like management style tips from that. Then I went into a banquet operations job, which I think gave me such a solid foundation for what I do now, because I learned what can actually fit in a room versus what you can put on a piece of paper to say that it will fit in a room. I learned how to manage different personalities and backgrounds. Again, I worked the evening shift for that, which was great, really. I mean, I was in my mid-20s and I went into work at 2 p.m. and got off at 12 p.m. It was great. It was great.
Yeah, that's a good schedule.
But I think I got to that place based off of different leaders that were my leaders, my bosses at different properties. So I had one boss that was the extreme micromanaging type. Like, she would print out my banquet event orders, mark them up in red, and I felt like I was back in grade school. It was rough. Then my next and final boss, the last boss that I hopefully ever have, he was the fun, like, let's all go out, get a beer after work, great fun guy, until he wasn't. And when you were on his list for whatever reason and you didn't always know why you were on that list, sometimes it was just that he maybe had had a fight with his wife and he came in and he was seeking out. Yeah, it was rough. It was not good.
Yeah.
So I think those things kind of played into the idea of, I've seen different leaders. I've pulled what has been great from them. I've pulled the things that I never want to show up as a leader one day. And it was that combination of, I can say this, if it had been just me, if I was making that decision, I would have had that meeting with that event planner that I thought was a job interview, and I would have said no way. So whether it is a spouse or a friend or a mom or just someone in your life, I think everyone needs that person that is going to push them a little bit. And Jason was that person for me. So that was the tipping point for me, was someone said, you can do it. And I didn't believe it, but I took that leap of faith anyway. Now, I was also mid-20s, no children, little debt, and we had a safer salary to fall back on with Jason. So that was why.
But I mean, I think even then, it's like that leap of faith is tough, especially when you're purchasing an already existing business. It's not even like, oh, let me just figure this out and do it on the side. And, once the side gets bigger and bigger, then I can like dive into it fully. I mean, you're literally taking somebody else's baby and making it your own now. So
I actually thought that would be easier. When I looked at it from the outside, I really did. I thought, I am buying the reputation. I am buying the brand. I will walk into this and it's like a ready-made business, like just well-oiled machine. And that's what I didn't.
Yeah. And you're not the only one. There's so many people out there that buy already existing businesses, and the due diligence is not thorough. And sometimes it's not even their fault. It's because they're not given the right information, or they just don't know how to get the right information at that time. And so, I love how you had your husband as your cheerleader, as your support system to help keep making you move forward and take that leap of faith. But then when you were in the process of purchasing, did you literally just go back to her office and say, okay, I'm going to buy it? Or did you like say, give me your papers, give me your balance sheets, give me your stuff? Or
I
like,
said, oh, okay. I think I said at first in that Starbucks, I was like, And then mentally I was like, no way, this is never happening.
yeah,
So I said, okay, I'll get back to you. And so Jason and I had this conversation. I believe, if I remember correctly, and please forgive me, I'm being completely honest, but I do
yeah,
believe I've blacked out parts of this just from that experience.
trauma.
Trauma. She gave a number and we negotiated on that number. We did ask, what are the bookings that you have for next year? What is the price point for those? You know, what have you been charging for weddings over the last 4 years? Very general, soft questions. I don't believe that I ever, yeah, I know, right? I needed you badly. We asked those questions. I did shadow a couple weddings with her. She did, obviously, like what we purchased was the website, which she had just redone. We purchased the lease to the office space that she had. We purchased the furniture that was in the office, and we purchased the weddings, the 4 weddings that were remaining for the following year. And, you know, whatever reputation that she had, we did purchase that for better or for worse. I trusted that what she said was true, and some of those things didn't turn out to be true. So that's one of those, if you take anything from this, just from my story, definitely would be do that due diligence. Don't ever take someone's word for when you're purchasing a business. I would never do that again. I mean, I'm 37 at this point, and I would never make the mistakes that I made at 27. But I'm glad I did, in a way. Like, I'm glad if I had found out, if I'd really done the due diligence to the 10th degree, I probably wouldn't have purchased the business. And so I'm glad that I did, because I had the opportunity to turn it around. But I wish that I had had legal advice. I wish that I had even known what questions to ask, because we didn't know. We had no idea. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like just the mere fact, because when you're purchasing a company, you're not just purchasing the assets of the company. Sometimes you're taking over their liabilities also. You're not purchasing them, but they're transferred over to you. And of course, their goodwill is also part of the company's evaluation. And I think a lot of times when people are purchasing businesses, they don't realize that it's not just like what you said, their word, but you really do need to have a third party come in, do the audits, do the due diligence, and actually, go and ask other industry people and ask them, hey, what do you think about this business? And now it's even easier because we have so much social media and Facebook groups that you can easily ask these questions. But, 10 years ago, it wasn't this accessible, and it wasn't this close knit of a situation either.
No, there were no, Facebook was around, but there were no Facebook groups. There was no,
it hadn't blown up the way it is now.
Absolutely not. We didn't even have a valuation done on the business. She gave a price and we countered, and then that was it. Like, there was no, this is what it's valued at. It was just a number in her head, which isn't that crazy that we did that 10 years ago. I would not recommend that either.
Yeah, probably not. But like you said, you gained so much wisdom.
Yes. Yes.
And you very quickly became a more refined business owner because of those situations. Yes, it was probably scrappy in the beginning.
So scrappy.
But how did you combat the bad reputation? How did you remedy that? Because that is something hard to rehabilitate. And so what were some of the steps that you did take? And if you don't mind sharing, what were some of the things that she had created a bad reputation on?
Sure, absolutely. So this is where I believe my background as a venue coordinator really helped me, because I knew that I was going in to these venues, because venues is going to be the major source of business for all vendors, but of course for wedding planners as well. A lot of times a couple will book their venue and then decide they need a planner or coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
The venue will say, you need to have one based off of our requirements. So I started to go into these meetings, and at first I went in there like smiley and just upbeat and ready to connect and excited that I had this fancy new business. And then I would say after maybe the fifth venue, that's when I started to think like, this is consistently not going well. And I remember laying in bed at night thinking, what have I done? Like, could I potentially go back to my job at the Renaissance, which is the Marriott property I was working at? Could I go back to that? And just like, this is a nightmare that was a mistake, and hope that they will take me back. But what I did, and what I believe was that turning point, is I knew that my professionalism, like being professional, is really important to me. So I knew if I could get my foot in the door and bring an event to them, or have the opportunity, like if I could get them to refer me, I could set myself apart pretty quickly from the previous owner. So I started to shift the way that I would talk to the venue coordinators when I would go into those meetings. So instead of saying, I'm Megan, I'm the new owner of A Southern Soiree, like here's who I am and how I think I could help, that was not my goal. My goal was, tell me what makes your life easier when there's a planner involved in, and what do you love about working with planners? Tell me what you don't love. Like, what are the things that planners do that kind of make your life more difficult? Because I had seen that as a venue coordinator. So I knew asking those questions was something that no other planner was doing when they were going to those meetings. And
what
I think
a great tip.
Yes, I teach that now to other wedding planners. I'm like, let me tell you how to get your foot in the door versus going and dropping off business cards. Like, that's not going to get you anywhere.
I hate to interrupt this awesome conversation, but I have to stop and talk with you about the number one thing I'm asked about by entrepreneurs: contracts. They're vital to any business relationship and to protect your business. But I also know that entrepreneurs, especially when you're starting up, money is tight. But I would never want you to compromise on a strong legal foundation. So enter yourcontractbuddy.com, a website created by me with contract templates created and drafted by me and fellow industry partners. They're ready to use and easy to plug in immediately, and they are not restricted to any specific state. So yourcontractbuddy.com is sponsoring this episode, and you and your listener can get 10% off right now with code LAWCHAT. Yes, you heard me right. 10% off right now with code LAWCHAT. And now back to our awesome conversation.
So yeah, I started asking, like, what could I do to make your life easier? Tell me about like the things. It was just asking questions related to event planners in general. I wasn't looking for them to give me specific names. I wasn't asking to be put on their preferred vendor list. I just wanted to make their life easier, and I asked how I could do that. And I think that they walked away from those meetings thinking like, I've never been asked that before. Like, that's an interesting thing, and I would like to give this girl a chance. And it was a combination of, there were still leads coming into the business. So I was I was two things. I was pretty cheap, and and I was very intentional about how I served those leads. Like, those leads came in, I got back to them faster than you could, snap your fingers. I was in their inbox. I was ready to hop on a call. And then my pricing was very competitive because I knew that if I didn't book weddings, I wouldn't pay the bills. And I think that's something that industry vendors that are veterans that have been in the business for a long time, they can get really hung up on the newbies that come in that charge less than them. And there's always going to be a newbie. I mean, there's always going to be someone that is charging not enough, right? And they're either going to figure that out, and they're going to realize that they're working hours upon hours, and they're going to consistently raise their rates, or they're not going to stay around. So I just think that vendors and industry pros waste too much time and effort and energy worrying about the newbies coming in that are undercutting them, and just focus more on like what you have to offer and what the value is that you bring. So sorry, that was
I
a little
totally
side note.
agree. And I think like the newbies also, you know, you have to get your foot in the door. And sometimes on a self-worth level also, you might feel like you don't have enough experience to ask for that high number. And
Right.
so let me start with this, and whoever wants this. And then of course, you know, with time, you'll realize your value and the amount of work you're putting in and feedback. And then, but yeah, I mean, I think you have to make space as people who have already been in the industry for other people to come in.
Yes. Yes. So
And
that was,
there's enough business to go around.
there
So
absolutely is. So that was what I did, was I asked
yeah.
different questions. I was quick to respond. I mean, I hustled. I worked a ton of hours. I was probably working 60 to 70 hours in the first 18 months of my business, just building relationships with venues, with vendors. I was doing wedding shows. I was over serving my clients. And that became, I have two mottos, like company mottos and life mottos, and they are under promise and over deliver, which I know is a common thing, but that is how I show up for people that are important to me and for my clients. It's, I'm going to tell you, I'll get you the contract on X date, but I'm planning to get it earlier. Or I'm going to tell you, it seems simple and like common sense, but for creative industry vendors, I think sometimes we make promises and then they're hard to fulfill, right? And then the other one is just like, do what you say you're going to do, follow through on your commitments. So that's how 10 years ago that I started to repair and rebuild the reputation to what it is now.
I love that, because I think not just for repairing a pre-existing reputation, but even for repairing an existing reputation in your own personal business, that can always hold true. You know, going in and asking those open-ended questions so people will talk, and showing them your willingness to hear also, I think that makes the difference. So the whole question of tell me how I can help you or how I can make this easier for you is such an open-ended question, but it can really be filled with a lot of information as like the answers come to you. So I think that's brilliant. And then also taking action, right? Like we can talk about it all day long, but if we don't take action, it's worth nothing. And so it's so beautiful that you went in there and you took those actions, and you know, you delivered a lot and you were very timely. And so I think that definitely helps overturn any negativity that might be existing.
And I think you have a great point in that it doesn't have to be as a new business owner. I think 2020 has presented an opportunity, no matter where you are in business, that if leads are not where you want them to be, or prospective clients are not banging down your door, or vendor referrals are not at a place that they once were, perhaps all of those things give you the opportunity to go to these connections and say, hey, I know we used to work together more and we haven't much lately. I'm really putting in time and effort into making sure that I show up in a way that, you know, is great for our working together. And I would love to hear ways that either I could improve or ways that other vendors in my same category, like what you love about working with them, as I'm looking to like level up in 2021. I think that's, it's perfect timing for that.
I think so too. I mean, I personally have a lot of clients who are in the wedding industry, or professionals in the wedding industry. And most of them, their biggest pain point during COVID-19, I mean, it's still happening, but like, is the fact that there was a lot of cancellations and rescheduling, and navigating those relationships was so hard. And I mean, I know there are some venue owners and, you know, other wedding professionals who have earned the worst reputation during this entire pandemic. And they've been sued. They've been in the news also, not to mention any of them. But, you know, it's kind of like, you also have to realize that if there's a lot of people doing that in the same industry, you're not only creating bad reputation for yourself, but for the industry as well.
Yes.
And that's, I think, such a bigger burden to carry, but also something that is such a responsibility to take care of as well if you love your industry and what you're doing. So
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Yes. Which hopefully we still do after this is all said and done.
So I think you're right. I think, there's no time like right now to fix whatever is going wrong. And yeah, introspection and to make those active changes, I think I could use, in the legal industry, you can do that. In any industry, you can do that.
Any industry. Yeah. It's not just the events or hospitality side of things. I think it's just a great time to say, again, going back to what we said earlier, it's what do I want to leave in 2020 and what am I taking with me in 2021? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to literally ponder on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell me, what other challenges did you face when you purchased this existing, and how has it become what it's become in these past 10 years? Because now you're not, when someone says a Southern Soiree, there's a whole another, feelings that are out there. It's like luxury, it's really nice. And so how did that happen? And what were some other challenges that you faced?
Yes, I'm very proud of that. I think some of the other challenges that I faced were that there was certainly a learning curve going from a venue coordinator to an actual planner. There were some logistical things. There was going from having someone telling me what to do and having a boss and having a time that I showed up to work and a time that I left work to it being all on me. So understanding what that CEO role or business owner role looks like, which again, mid to late 20s, I found myself like driving down the road one day, 10:30 in the morning and thinking like, this is amazing. Normally I would be sitting at my desk or sitting in our weekly sales meeting and no one can tell me where to be right now. And that part was very liberating. So there was a lot of freedom to being a business owner, but going back to being that like go-getter achiever that is kind of part of who I am, I accepted the challenge of this is a rotten apple. What can I do with it to turn it around? And I knew as much as it crossed my mind and I had moments of what have I done? Can I go back and get my job? It was just playing out that possibility. But the reality was I knew I will do whatever it takes to turn this around. And whatever it takes was jumping and leaning towards like extreme burnout. So I said under promise and over deliver and follow through. That was at the expense of myself. I bought the business in 2010, newly married. My husband worked a 8 to 5 job and I worked nights and weekends. I would take client, if a client wanted to meet at 7:00, I was going to meet at 7:00. If a prospective client was coming into town for the weekend and was interviewing wedding planners, but I had a wedding that Saturday, I would meet with them before the wedding. And then I would work a 12 to 14 hour day. And it was ridiculous. It was just ridiculous. So those first couple years were hard. And then, so 2010 took over the business. 2012, I became a mom and I could talk for hours, and I won't, but I could talk for hours about what I did as a new mom that I would go back and do differently, or that if someone is listening to this and they are a parent and they're trying to juggle and do all the things, there are certain things that I saw as being proud of it. And then now with reflection, I look back on, I'm like, gosh, you can't get that time back. Like I'll give you an example. We talked about this a little bit, but I had this conversation with my friend Kinsey, who has a podcast called She Creates Business. And we did an episode on what is entrepreneurship costing you and is it worth it? And we shared different stories of things over the years of being business owners. But here's one of the things that I, for many years, have said like, oh, this is one of those stories that I want known about me in the wedding industry for years to come. And it was something I was proud of. And now when I replay it, I'm like, gosh, I'm not proud of that at all. I got pregnant in 2011. I was starting to really like climb out of the bad reputation. I was stopping hearing that previous owner's name all the time. It was starting to be me, and I was really excited.
Yeah.
I had hired someone that I couldn't really afford, but I hired someone to help me out, and luckily she's still with me 9 years later. And I remember going to the doctor, and they tell you what your due date is, and they said your due date is June 30th, 2012. And I was like, oh no, that was the biggest wedding of my 2-year career thus far. It was at the best venue. It was the sweetest, greatest couple. And I thought, I have to work that wedding. Like, there's no way I cannot show up. So I started that from the time I found out my due date. I just started telling people it was a different due date. Like, I just pushed it back by like 2 weeks. Who does that? Like, who does that? Wedding vendors would be like, when are you due? And I'd be like, mid-July. I just changed it. I told the couple mid-July. I was like, don't worry, I'll be there. Like, I'm going to be at your wedding. It's fine. It's fine. I obviously had a backup plan should that not work out, but I convinced myself and everyone around me that I would be at that wedding, and everyone that said like, you're crazy, you're not going to do it. That was just further like flame for me of, yes, I will.
You were fueling that fire of your number 3.
That's right.
Someone says no, I'm like, let me show you.
Exactly. So I worked a wedding the weekend before my due date, 99 degrees outdoor wedding. It was miserable, but that wasn't even the one that was on my radar. Like, I was fine to do that one. It was the one the weekend after that I was like, no, I'll be there. I woke up the morning of the wedding. I was having contractions.
No way.
I was. Yes, I was having contractions. And I was like, but are these contractions? I don't know. That everyone says they could be like false, but it's fine. I'm going.
Right.
And yeah, I ended up working that wedding contractions throughout the day. Like, they were starting to build faster. And I was like, yeah, these are legit contractions now. I feel them. But I worked that wedding until 10:30 that night, to when I couldn't go any further. There was like 30 minutes left. I left. I went to the hospital. I was in active labor. I was up the rest of the night in labor. I had my daughter the next day via C-section at noon. And I say all this, and I say it like, look at me, I'm a badass, but I want you to understand that I don't recommend that. And if I could go back and do it differently, there's a lot of things I would do differently, because I then turned around and worked a destination wedding 6 weeks after she was born. And I thought, like, look, everyone, like, look, industry, I can do it all. I can handle it all. I can juggle all the balls. But gosh, like, that was all for outside approval versus internally what I would do now. So I guess, I'm sorry, that was a really long answer, but it was the answer of struggles. And it was just, yes, I turned the business reputation around. I've gone through hiring the wrong person and having to let that person go more than once, because the view of this industry, the events industry specifically for me, is that people see it as very glamorous, and girls apply for the job and they think like, I love weddings and I loved planning my own wedding, so it's going to be great to be a wedding planner. And they don't understand the intense commitment from just emotionally, mentally, physically that comes with it. So I've hired the wrong people. I have worked with some difficult clients. I have tried to be 100% a mom of 3 and 100% a business owner, and seen how impossible that is. I think 2016 was like that turning point for me of burnout, and realizing like, wow, 6 years in, couple kids, I had 2 kids at that point, and just understanding like some things had to change. So that's 2016 to now has been a journey of what's working, what's not working, other business decisions that have, this is interesting from a legal standpoint. In 2017, I almost, like, we had paid the legal fees to, get this all set up, but I almost went in on a 7-year venue lease with a partner,
Mm-hmm.
because that was one of those things that I had as like a goal that I wanted to do eventually, was own a venue.
Right.
And I didn't go through with it. In the last like couple months, we had the partnership agreement, we
Mm-hmm.
had the drawn up lease, we had met with an architect, all these things were going into place, money had already come out. I actually had a large check sitting in my house. We had refinanced our house, pulled out money for this down payment and everything. It was such a turning point of like listening to that voice, that inner voice that we all have, right?
Yeah.
We all have that voice that
Right.
is either saying like, do it or don't do it, or like, you got this, you don't got it. But for me, it's full circle, because if you go back to 2010, my inner voice tends to lean towards no. It leans towards
Mm-hmm.
like, don't do it. That could be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was reflecting on like, but I said no in 2010. And then Jason convinced me to say yes. And so 2017, I was pregnant with my third daughter. We were getting ready to go through with this because it was a dream. It was a goal. It was something that I said I wanted to do and I wanted to get there. I had to distinguish. And I think everyone can hopefully relate to this, but I believe you have that voice of like fear that is going to say no just because it's scary. And then you have like that really like that gut that you have to
Mm-hmm.
listen to. And I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to discern between the two. Is this nerves, or is this really not what I'm supposed to be doing? So yeah, I walked away from a partnership in a 7-year venue lease, which I got to say, I'm kind of glad right now in the middle
Yeah.
of coronavirus that happened. But
Yeah.
those are struggles. Those are interesting decisions. And
I think I completely agree with you. And I think the struggles you mentioned are so real and so prevalent in everybody's life as an entrepreneur, whether you are building a business from ground zero or whether you are building a pre-existing business. Because either way, even if you build a pre-existing business, you have to make it your own. You have to put your stamp on it. You have to put your branding on it. And even if you buy the intellectual property of that business, meaning the trademark, the name, the style, all that good stuff, but branding also comes from the way you make people feel after you
right.
leave them in your business. And, you know, just the different, like having self-care, juggling family life, whether you have kids or don't have kids, or, you know,
Yes.
however, whatever your family life status is, you're still juggling that. And also, you know, juggling existing clients or employees and how to handle them and how to handle their emotions. It's all real challenges that are happening, right? And I think with you also, like you say, you know, you're like, it's not a proud moment. But at the same time, I think when we're hungry, especially in the beginning, we make those decisions. We make decisions that we are stretching ourselves so much that we don't realize that we're going to have that burnout. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, for a lot of entrepreneurs, we slow down or pause or reassess or reevaluate when we have the burnout. But I think this is such a great point that we need to actually involve self-care from the beginning as well as we can. Like literally take time out, carve it out. And I say this and I don't do it myself that well. I'm terrible
I
at it.
know.
And,
I know.
you know, but at the same time, it's like after so many years, you also realize what you can say no to. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
taking that partnership that you are about to get into, that is like saying no to that when you're at literally that point of where you're just about to sign. That's all you got to do. And stepping away from that takes a lot of courage. So, how
Yes.
did you do that? How did you take that bold step? Because that's hard sometimes, even whether it's business relationship or a personal relationship, it's hard even when you see the red flags. So, how did you do that?
Gosh, that is something that it was interesting because I kept checking in with my husband. You know, he's my cheerleader. He is my partner in life and in business and in raising children. And I trust his opinion a
Mm-hmm.
lot. So it was interesting because I joke, I think everyone should have their own like little circle of trust, the people
Yeah.
that they go to. And my mom's in that circle of trust. My husband's in that circle of trust. My number two, Gina, that's been with me for 9 years, she's in that circle of trust. And I kept going to Jason and saying, like, should we really do this? Like, when I think about this business idea, I feel like I could throw up. I don't feel excitement. I feel just
Mm-hmm.
full anxiety. And he was like, no, this is going to be great. You've been wanting to do this. We've talked about this for years. So he did like the same thing that he did 10 years ago. And to have to listen to myself as the loudest voice versus that circle of trust that was excited for this opportunity as well. I think that was very empowering. It required courage, but it was empowering to say, like, I hear you. I also hear this business partner. I hear what Gina on my team is saying, like, yeah, you can totally do this. You're going to be great. You're at that place. But to really like hear those voices, respect those voices still to those day, like look to those voices and love them, but to think like, nope, I understand that I'm at capacity. I'm about to have a third baby.
Yeah.
I think I went back to 2012 when I was a mom and I gave everything to my business and I wanted to show the world, look what I can do. And I didn't want that in 2017. I wanted to relish those moments with that, what we knew was our last child. And I didn't want to do something. It was like also kind of pushing back on my Enneagram 3, which was kind of empowering too. It was the idea of like, I don't want to do this just because I said I wanted to one day, or it was a goal. Like, is this really still a goal of mine? So one thing I say to other entrepreneurs is you should have long-term goals. I believe in that. And I know there's a lot out there about like vision casting, which I don't really do, but I understand the point of it. But I think that it's important to like constantly check in with yourself and ask like, okay, this was a 5-year goal, but is it still, I don't have to work towards something that maybe isn't meant to serve me anymore, you know?
And goals can change, and it's okay to change them too, and give yourself permission to change them.
Yes.
Because I think that's the number one thing, is like how we feel so loyal to our goals, or as if we are letting ourselves down if we don't do it. And I think, I agree with you on the whole assessing where the fear is coming from, because I do that. If my fear is coming from I'm just nervous and scared because I feel incapable or incompetent, I'm like, no, we got to keep pushing it forward. We got to keep going forward. But if my desire to not do something is stemming from something else, then I know that that's my inner voice that is like talking and saying the gut, there's your instinct, whatever you want to call it. And I completely agree with you. So, I feel like when you have challenges, it seems like one of your biggest anchors is your husband. Is there anything else that anchors you when you do have the challenges, or when you're just feeling like lousy? We all feel lousy at some time. So.
Yeah, I think I've been on a journey for that over the last 2 years to figure that out, to carve out that time. And you talked about self-care a little bit, and I'm really just coming around to what that means for me as someone that pours out a lot. I heard the analogy somewhere. It's like, you have to make sure that, this is definitely not for me, but you have to make sure that your cup is filled before you can pour into others. And so I think I am a spiritual person. I think finding quiet time for myself each day and finding like something that gives me fulfillment, that's been huge really recently. So like the last 2 years. Before I would say that was not part of my day to day. And yes, that circle of trust. So I think you do need different people in your life, because I look at my husband as the cheerleader, the go, you got this, like, you're amazing. And then I have my mom that I must be like her, because she is I remember when we told her we were going to buy A Southern Soiree 10 years ago, and we told her what I was going to leave this great job. She was like, "Ooh, don't do it. Like, I don't know if you should do it." And it comes from, she wants the best for me, and she doesn't want me to experience pain. And so I take a little bit of that. I take a little bit of Jason, a little bit of Gina, who is, I call her my work wife. And then you listen to those voices, but don't let them dictate every decision in life. I think that would be a takeaway I would want if you're listening to this right now. Like, you have that board of advisors or circle of trust, but don't forget, like, best. And
it's like with your child, right? Like, the minute you start making the decisions, you feel empowered. Like how you said earlier, you felt empowered when you made that decision to walk away, and you feel like, okay, I got this. This wasn't so terrible. I made a decision even though everybody else was saying, go, go, go.
Yes.
But I made the decision that was right for me and my business. So I think
Yes.
that's, even with children, it's the same thing. So
yeah. And I think that life is a series of paths. Did you read those books when you were a kid? Did you ever read the Choose Your Own Adventure books where it's like, if you want this, go to page 42?
Yes.
So I think about that, and I think about my choose my own adventures that I've taken in my years of living. And I think I said no to that venue, and that felt both great and also crushing to my people pleaser side, because I had to tell this potential business partner, like, I'm so sorry, we've spent the last year searching out venues and we have put a lot of time and effort and we have bonded, but I can't do this. Like, you can do it without me. And I understand that. And I know that you're going to be upset and angry with me. And he was pretty angry.
I can imagine.
I mean, I don't fault him. I get it. I totally
get it
too. But yes, I think that saying no to that, the page that I went down, gosh, I didn't know at the time, but it led to me to start my podcast. I had time. I had the space to do that. And I started connecting with all of these people throughout like the country and beyond in having these conversations. And I started my planner membership because of that.
Planner's Vault, right?
Yes. And I never, none of those things. I would not have a podcast. I would not be an educator or a speaker had I done a venue, because that would have been max capacity for me.
Yeah.
So I love that.
I think that is I love that reflection, because it truly makes you know that, yes, I made the right decision. And even when you think that you made a mistake in the beginning of purchasing A Southern Soiree, the 10 years you've been dedicated, you've been resilient, and you haven't let it go, even though it might have been a hot mess when you first bought it. But
yes.
But now you can say that was also a happy mistake. That was a blessing in disguise. The decisions we are making, whether we like them or not, they're all blessing in disguise. And even mistakes are opportunities for us to make ourselves better and to refine ourselves and go to the next level. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Now, we didn't really get to this Planner's Vault, but can you kind of touch on it really quickly and how you started it and what it's about?
Yes. So the Planner's Vault came from doing a fair amount of one-on-one consulting and coaching with planners in my market, and then starting to branch outside of that. And I realized that I was giving a lot of the same advice when it comes to client experience or vendor relations or the back end side of your business. I would type up these notes for each of these one-on-one consults, and looking back, I was like, same thing, same thing, same thing. It's the same struggles that a lot of business owners have, specifically planners. And I thought about how there are really great educators out there. You can hire a business coach, you can go through a course, and there's also a ton of free information that you can find on Google or in Facebook groups. But I believe that sometimes that can be a little overwhelming, because you can hear 42 different answers to how you should handle one particular client interaction. So I wanted to bridge the gap between free information and multi-$1,000 business coach, and be a resource for those planners that are just starting out that I did not have. It's interesting. I go back to where I was in year 0, and I figured everything out the hard way. And I wanted to create a little bit more space and community. And then the not funny part about it is that I launched the Planner's Vault. Like, it was brand new. I launched it February 27th of 2020. And then coronavirus came it was 2 weeks later, and all events stopped. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to lead brand new planners through a global pandemic when the event industry is shut down.
But I tell you, I can't think of a better time when they could have had a group of women or men that were in the same industry and helping and guiding each other. Like, that mentorship probably was unparalleled especially in the time when everything was just haywire. So
Yes, I think it created a community that is very tight knit. And I have said to them many times, it's like, you are, anywhere between 0 to 5 years in business, this will be the hardest year that you ever have. And if you can
yeah,
survive this, you will be fine. You will be just
yeah.
fine. So we're at 250 wedding planners right now.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's my goal. That's my focus. So
I
that's where
love
I
that.
kind of go into back to what I said at the beginning of where am I going in 2021? And I've
Mhm.
found that I love weddings because and events. I love that because I love conversations with people and I love earning
Mhm.
someone's trust. But at the end of the day, I don't feel fulfilled by planning someone's wedding anymore. I feel
Mhm.
much more fulfilled by pouring into other entrepreneurs. So I'm
Mhm.
shifting out
Yeah.
of weddings, which is
Yeah.
really great. It's great.
That's so nice because, I feel like you're at the mature and like 10 years is when it takes for a business to kind of gain traction, to have a foothold in their industry also. But also it's a lot
Mhm.
of experience in 10 years. And it's so cool to see you as a mature entrepreneur where you can make those decisions like, I'm going to step away from this and I'm going to move forward with this. And I think, I hope that people who are listening will know that if they are striving right now, that there will be a time where they can make those decisions, but they can make it today also. We don't have to say yes to everybody walking through that door.
Yes. Yes. That's a great
And
takeaway. Yes.
so I love that. I love that. Exit strategy should be there, and the mindset should be that I can exit if I need to.
That's
So
right. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
that is so wonderful. So we kind of touched on some legal stuff, but not really. And I know that you were like saying, "Oh, I wish I had a lawyer at that time." Just quick question. I'm really curious, actually. Did you ever go back to that person who sold you the business and say, "Hey, what did you sell me?" Or like, I mean, did that
I
conversation ever happen?
Not really. I mean, there were definitely certain things that I had to go back to her and be like, wait, you said that this was the remaining payment for this particular client, and that is not,
Yeah.
what is coming up now. So there were things like that. I started to share more publicly, not in the first couple of years, but I think I did a blog post at 5 years, and I wrote, this is what it's like to have owned a business over the last 5 years, and here's where the rough start came and how I dug out of it. And I remember her reaching out to me after reading that blog post, and
Wow.
not her view is different, and that's okay. Her
Cool.
view is that it is more from just the vendors, and it's a long story, but her view is
Mhm.
that it was not in the place that it was in, but that she wasn't the one going to those venues and hearing the stories
Mhm.
that I
Mhm.
heard. So we just decided to, I
Mm,
think I'm still friends with her on Facebook, and
that's nice. Yeah.
it's fine. It was 10 years. So at this point
Then
yeah,
it's
yeah,
gone.
yeah.
But if if you had any advice on what you needed at that time, or even now, like what
Yes.
are some like top three legal things would you tell everybody that this is what you really need when you're purchasing a business or running the business you're running?
Yes. Oh my gosh. You tell me. You tell
I can tell you a lot actually.
I bet you could. I bet you could. Actually, that would be interesting. Why don't you tell me what are three things that if you're purchasing a business
Yeah.
or you're taking over ownership, or let's say, because I've heard many stories of like planners that are the number two for the original planner and
Mhm.
they're going to take it over. Like, what are three things, like quick things that you're like, okay, this is what you need to do that Megan
Yeah.
did not do? It's fine.
No, it's totally fine. I mean, we can laugh about it because you're awesome right now and things are great and but I think, number one is due diligence. And due diligence is it's two words, but it has a lot of heavy lifting. And it's really digging deep into the financials of the company and also the industry reputation and the goodwill of the company. And also to know, especially if they have any debt or if they have any liens or if they have any other
Mhm.
things that where you are literally taking it over, and are you going to be now almost bankrupt because this person was
Oof.
on the cusp of bankruptcy? I can't tell you right now, especially in 2020, a lot of companies are on the cusp of bankruptcy, but they don't want to share that information with potential buyers because it is a deterrence. It is something where you're like, I don't know if I can handle it. But you were really kind. People can sue over this. People can sue. I know people who are in the middle of that real messy, transaction where information was not shared properly by the seller, and the seller can be held responsible for falsely sharing information or not disclosing the information they should have disclosed.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm just like so floored at how kind you guys were, because honestly,
we were just
like,
dumb. We were just dumb.
and honestly, like, ignorance can be a bliss, right? This all
Yes.
worked out for you because you kept going. You didn't allow that to stop you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also should be there, that there should be resilience. If you are purchasing a business, there's going to be some issues that are existing that they won't tell you about. There might be some existing manufacturers or vendors that don't want to do business with you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And not you, but the company. But they don't, but you won't know that. Even in due diligence, it's like buying a home and having an inspector come, but then they won't tell you that this light's not working. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something very small and minor. So that due diligence is huge. And if you need to bring in third parties for that, do it. It's worth it. It's worth the money that goes in up front. And that way,
peace of mind.
It's a peace of mind, right? Like, it's a total peace of mind. And then also I would, within that due diligence, also look at the contracts that are existing in the company, and, how are those contracts placed? Can they transfer over to the new owner, or do they not transfer over to the new owner?
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be something that you would want to look at and make sure that there is an option to assign to another person.
Right.
And then a third thing that I would definitely look at is intellectual property, is that when you are purchasing this business, what are the assets you're purchasing and what liability are you taking over? And do the assets include intellectual property? And what I mean by that is, does it include the trademark, the logo, the website? Does it include the paperwork that they've created? If they've, if you're buying somebody else's pre-existing wedding, business and their planners, are you going to also get all the templates that they've made, that they have stored for their clients? You need to know. Are you getting all of that? Is that part of it? Or do you have to reinvent the wheel? And then does it make sense to even buy it then? Or are you just buying the name? Are you
Same
buying
thing,
the
like
reputation?
images too, especially something like wedding. If it's event planning business, being able to use those images for your portfolio should be, I think, part of the purchase.
Yeah. And I mean, even how you talked about that there was already like 3 or 4 existing clients of this business, you want to make sure that those clients are okay with you taking over, because this is not just you're going to a Macy's or a Foley's. It's not that. This is now a very personal event. Like you said, there's a lot of emotion involved. Yes. And this is one person's big day, but you might be doing a lot of these, but for that one person, this means a lot. Yeah. And that agreement needs to be there. So
agreed. Those are great. That was way better for you.
I can keep on going.
Way better for you to answer than me. So I'm so glad that you did that.
I hope that was helpful. And I mean, the reason I ask you is because a lot of times when, in hindsight, right, where the void was, and you're like, oh gosh, I really wish somebody was there to just guide me, whether or not they, actually did the work. So yeah, I think it's, anytime you're purchasing a company though, you do need to involve some type of a CPA, some type of a lawyer, some type of a business consultant.
Yes, 100%. Those 3 people. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, or somebody who can, do those actively and give that due diligence. So,
yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, so good.
But I love it. I love that you never gave up. I love that through all the challenges, there was just a lot of dedication and grit. So that just is so nice. So tell me, let's talk about some fun facts before we leave. So what is your favorite book? Business, happy, personal, doesn't matter.
Well, I'm a big Brene Brown fan, and I just finished listening to the audio version book of Dare to Lead. So I thought that was really great, especially if you are a business owner or you aspire to have a team. I thought that that was really impactful for me. It made me just kind of look at my own team a little bit differently and how I could show up better as a leader to them. Another business book I love is Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller.
Oh yes, I love that
Love
too.
that book. And then just a personal one, I love You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. Those are like my 3 favorites.
Love it. Love it. And how are you disrupting the industry now?
Yeah, I think that I am not a lot of fluff. I am tangible, actionable things that you can do with your business at an affordable rate. So just being that in between right now for, like I said, the free information you can find on Google versus high-end business coach, which perhaps I will lean more in that direction later, but I'm really enjoying working with those planners and those wedding vendors that just are ready to hustle and put in the work, but they cannot afford $3,000 for a one-on-one business coach. So yeah.
That's nice. I love the Planner's Vault concept, and I just love everything like about it, whatever I've read about it and heard on She Creates Business, because I am obsessed with that podcast too.
Love her. Love Kenzie.
I do too. I love listening to her podcast. So it has so much tangible information and education. So, but also last question is, what's your favorite holiday tradition? You do celebrate the holidays. So if you what's your favorite holiday tradition?
Yes. So I have 3 girls and I love cooking with them. So we go big for Thanksgiving as far as we cook everything. We make Thanksgiving about getting together with family. My mom will come, my sister will come up, her dog will come. It'll be complete chaos. Like my kitchen will be an epic disaster. And I will manage my own expectations because I'll have that vision in my head of like, everyone's going to get along and the girls are going to be sweet to each other and hugging. But really, like my 6-year-old and 8-year-old will be fighting over who gets to put the flour in the recipe, and it'll end up all over my floor. But I'm going to love all of that. So I think just being with my family, cooking, sitting down to a meal, and not being connected and plugged into my business. I need that right now, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to that too. Thank you so much for coming on this show today. I appreciate it so much. Where can people contact you and reach you?
Yes. So I have a wedding industry podcast called Weddings for Real. You can check me out and find me on any podcast platform. We are there. On Instagram, I'm at Weddings for Real. And then the Planner's Vault is at Planner's Vault. And the website, if you want to hop on the waiting list, we open it up 4 times a year, is theplannersvault.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to put all this information in the show notes so people can communicate with you and connect with you. Thank you so much for coming today. It was so great talking to you.
Great conversation. Thank you.
I know. It was wonderful. So much insight. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining Law Chat with Girija. I love these kind of stories and conversations where we can be real, honest, and open, and having fun at the same time. I hope you are inspired and motivated to keep doing the amazing work you are doing. If this is something that gave you all those feels and then some, truly motivated and inspired for you, you can show your love in all or one of these ways. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and share this video with your community and tell them about it, or share with somebody that can benefit from it. I look forward to seeing you next time on another episode of Law Chat, and until then, keep moving forward. Bye.